Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In addition to virtues and vices concerned with things like courage, temperance, justice, things having to do with ambition, like great-souledness or right ambition, generosity and magnificence with respect to wealth or other resources, and then finally good temper with respect to the emotion of anger. Aristotle discusses a number of different virtues that are concerned primarily with our social existence. A little bit of background, he says that man is a political animal, that is, the human being is an animal of the polis, of the society. And you can think of that in terms of, broad scale political things, but he really means, in some respect, face-to-face interactions. And this also extends to the household, which has connections with that. And then all these intermediate things between the political society as a whole, the household, friendships, all these intermediate things. We have to deal with each other as human beings. And part of human nature is actually concerned with things like humor. And so Aristotle talks about virtues and vices that are concerned with joking, amusements, entertainment, conversation. There's various ways in which we can translate the terms that he's using for this. And what is he concerned with? As with all the other virtues and vices, there is a mean, a middle position, where you have a number of rights, finding the right balance of things. And then there's an excess, and then there's a deficiency. And the excesses and deficiencies are what we call vices. Shouldn't have written an excess deficiency. So, with respect to humor, with respect to joking around, which, by the way, for Aristotle is a thing that goes both ways. It has to do with how we act towards others, whether we make jokes, whether we make fun of them, whether we pick on them, what kind of humor we're involved with, when we do it, how far we push it. It also has to do with what we're willing to take in, what we're willing to accept, what we enjoy, and what we turn off from. So let's start with the mean. He says, good humor or wit, it observes certain limits. In some respects, the mean is closer to the excess because the deficiency is not to enjoy humor at all, or to be humorless, to be boorish, as our Oxfordy translators tend to render this. And we don't have a lot of good words for this that I can think of. When it comes to the excess for vice, another translation is vulgarity, jackassishness. Jackassery would be a perfectly good way of translating it as well, much more in the vernacular. But coming back to the mean, good humor and wit means that you do enjoy joking around, conversation, other people engaging in witticisms, and it's sort of an ability to appreciate what other people are bringing and then to contribute your own. Aristotle actually in the Eudemian Ethics, where he actually talks quite a bit about this, he says, wittiness is a middle state. The witty man is between the boorish or stiff man and the buffoon. Just as in the matter of food, the squeamish man differs from the omnivorous. So he's using a culinary metaphor. This is the squeamish person, the finicky eater, the one who really has to subsist on this diet or that diet and can't take in a lot of stuff. This is the person who will eat anything, the omnivore. And, you know, in our contemporary culture, that would go pretty far, wouldn't it? So he says, the squeamish man differs from the omnivorous in that the former takes nothing or little, and that reluctantly the latter accepts everything readily. The boor stands in relation to the vulgar man or buffoon. The former takes no joke except with difficulty. The latter accepts everything and with pleasure. Neither course is right, he says. One should allow some things and not others. So there's certain limits. There's certain standards of good taste or decorum, beyond which a person doesn't go, if they actually have a good humor or wit. There's certain boundaries. Now, Aristotle doesn't spell this out very clearly, but, you know, we could apply a lot of the other rights, you know, right time, right reason, right person, to this as well. There's no reason why you can't apply all of those to every one of the virtues and vices. And so what Aristotle says is that this person is going to remain within certain boundaries. They're not going to joke all the time. They wouldn't, for example, tell jokes at a funeral, although they might at the wake if it's an Irish wake, you know, where everybody's enjoying themselves. And so actually my dad had when he died. My mom enjoyed that quite a bit. One of her girlfriends put it on. There's an adaptability to good humor. So occasion, when should you joke, when shouldn't you joke? What kind of jokes are allowed to be told in this situation, in that situation? Who do you joke about? What sort of things do you joke about? Or what sort of things do you point out? What kind of jokes do you tell? And then, you know, you can also ask, what reason? Why are you joking? Is it to try to actually give pleasure? Is it to tease the other person, to be mean-spirited? Is it to try to put people in their place? Aristotle doesn't talk about this, but one of the other vices that we could talk about are the people who use humor as a weapon against other people. And I don't mean, you know, like political satirists. In that case, you know, that's more like using rhetoric. I'm talking about people in personal life or in workplaces, or there's professors who do this as well with students, who demean people, who belittle them by using something that looks a lot like humor but really isn't humor. And this helps to show us the dividing lines between the excess and the mean. And it has to do with cause and pain. Aristotle is very clear about this. He says, can we define proper raillery? Raillery is when you're like poking at somebody, joking with them, by saying that its jests are never unbecoming to gentlemen, the people who are agathon and kalon, who have the right sort of, you know, moral values, or that it avoids giving pain or indeed actually gives pleasure to its object. He says, or is it impossible to define something so elusive? For tastes differ as to what is offensive and what is amusing. He says, whatever rule we lay down, the same will apply to the things a man should allow to be said to him. And can we figure this out? And we can come up with sort of rough rules. Sometimes we have to, you know, lay these rules down because somebody goes too far and we say that really is causing pain. Sometimes we require some experience with respect to this. But here's what is going on with the mean. This is a person who is actually attuned well enough to others to not cause them pain by joking with them or making fun of them, and actually cause them some degree of pleasure. So think of, if you've ever had this experience, introducing somebody at a banquet or a conference, you know, a speaker, and, you know, poking some gentle fun at them. It actually makes them feel good. You can make fun of people who are rich and are not, you know, insecure about their wealth by talking about them being cheap or things like that. You know, you can attribute things to people provided they're not going to take it too personally and get upset about it. So you wouldn't, for example, make fun of somebody who is sensitive about their baldness by talking about their big bald spot or why they shave their head. If somebody has a body odor problem, you wouldn't, you know, and they're sensitive about that, you wouldn't focus on that. If somebody is particularly ugly, you might not make fun of them for that. You know, it's interesting if you look at roasts. Roasts are where you would think it's all buffoonery. And those go to show us that there is a bit of situationality to it. That, you know, some things can go at a roast that certainly wouldn't go at a awards banquet or at the family Thanksgiving dinner or, you know, things along those lines. Even at roast, you can say, well, that person really went too far. They were mean-spirited. They were just there to get a laugh no matter what. And then there's others, you look at them and you're like, man, that person actually has good taste. They're able to take a joke and give a joke back, and what they're saying, it may be kind of biting, but it's not like devastating. Now, over on this end, this is not to say that people who are, you know, joking all the time are necessarily telling jokes that hurt people. As a matter of fact, that could be just you know, a very small portion of the time. But what's going on is that they don't observe limits. And they're being drawn by different desires than the person who has good taste. The person who has good taste wants to enjoy conviviality with other people. They want to enjoy, literally, that sort of being lively together, that sense of enjoyment, of you know, bubbling passion, sparkling wit, that sort of thing. This person needs to joke all the time. And that's a problem because they will inevitably go too far. There's, you know, in a lot of cases there's something lacking in their life when they need to constantly fill things in with humor. You know, think about the person, for example, in our culture who's always quoting funny movie lines until they quit being funny. And they use them over and over again in situations. Now, that's not really causing pain in the sense of like hurting people's feelings. Instead, it's like impinging upon people. They're like, come on, that's enough. Just knock it off. You know, I've heard that line 20 times. It's no longer funny. These are the people who need attention, the attention that humor gives. And they also, you know, some of them may be people who cannot settle down and be serious about things about which one actually ought to be serious. Now, if we swing to the other extreme, we have this boorishness, stick in the mud kind of people, the people that are not good to joke around with. They tend not to make jokes themselves. They may not actually understand jokes if it's really, really far to the extreme. They don't enjoy humor in others. Oftentimes they take offense at other people's attempts to introduce jokes. So, you know, you can see the perfect odd couple would be somebody like this and somebody like this put together. This person is going to drive this person nuts, and this person is also going to drive this person nuts. They do cause pain to other people as well, in part because if you make a joke to them, if you're just trying to, like, you know, have fun, make friends, carry on light conversation, they can't do it. So these are the people that need to be serious all the time. Saturday Night Live actually had this skit called Debbie Downer. It's interesting because we learn a lot about comedy and humor from comedians and you know, the people who are actually engaged in it. And that makes perfect sense because they actually reflect on it quite a bit. Debbie Downer would always have something serious and sad to say after everybody said anything. You know, like they might talk about their cat and she'd say her cat died last week. Now, does that cause pain in the sense of, like, you know, tearing somebody down or, you know, reawakening old painful memories? Probably not. But it does cause a pain or discomfort or social, what would we call it? You know, it's the opposite of when things are going well socially, and social friction, let's call it. Awkwardness, that's the word for it, awkwardness. People like this tend to be rather awkward. So, this is going to be the mean that we want to aim for. And Aristotle does have a few other things to say about it. He says, we want to rely on the person who actually has good judgment when it comes to this as the standard. This is in some respects a virtue that's harder to pin down than, say, justice or temperance or even courage. It's a little bit more malleable, a little bit more ephemeral, but it is something that's a very important part of our life. I'm going to close by actually mentioning something. The medievals would sometimes jokingly define man, or human being, as the risible animal, meaning the animal that laughs. And you say, well, what about parrots? What about hyenas? Hyenas aren't actually laughing in the same sense that we are. They don't enjoy humor. Parrots are just parroting things back. Some higher animals do seem to mess with each other and to enjoy that and to engage in play. But do they actually play jokes on each other? Not so much. We have an entire sort of universe of that, particularly now that we have the internet, and you can generate your own memes. You can just type in humor, and all sorts of websites will come up. I actually try to make sure, no matter how much work I'm actually doing or bogged down in, to do something each day that will involve some sort of humor. It could be reading an Evelyn Waugh story, because it's that dry, biting, sardonic wit. It could be going on College Humor and watching a skit. It could be going on Cracked and reading one of their 10 most lists or something like that. And I think that's a very important part of life, and I think it's a very important part of health, and I think Aristotle would agree. So this is the mean that we want to aim at.